Welcome to this lecture on medical law. Today we'll be reviewing medical negligence and the Bolam test. As with all things nowadays, we must include a legal disclaimer. The information I am providing here is intended for education purposes only, and with all information provided being well documented in the public domain. Under no circumstances shall we accept any liability for any loss or damage incurred as a result of improper use of this lecture. If you require independent legal advice, please seek a professional legal opinion. I am a medical doctor. I am not your lawyer. Clinical negligence is defined as the failure by a healthcare professional to exercise a reasonable standard of care. In addition to this, a doctor should only be considered as negligent where the following can be proven. 1. The doctor has a duty of care to the claimant. 2. The doctor breached his duty by falling below the reasonable standard of care. And 3. Foreseeable harm has occurred to the claimant. As I'm sure you're aware, the main question here is, how do we determine whether the doctor has fallen below the reasonable standard of care? This is where the Bolam test comes in. Let's review the Bolam test in some detail. Bolam test has become a legal method for determining whether a doctor acted negligently, i.e., did the doctor act to a reasonable standard of care? The test is based upon the case of Mr. Bolam, who was a voluntary psychiatric patient at Friern Hospital back in the 1950s. Mr. Bolam suffered from recurrent depression, which was treated with electroconvulsive therapy. At the time, a number of methods existed, including a modified ECT method, which included the use of muscle relaxants and restraints, and an unmodified ECT method, which was the original technique first used in the 1930s when no relaxants are used. In Bolam's case, his doctor used an unmodified technique where no muscle laxants nor restraints were used. During ECT, the patient suffered hip fractures resulting from violent muscle contraction. Whilst Mr. Bolam's symptoms of depression had improved, he was not happy with his resulting injuries, so he sued the committee for compensation. He made the argument that they were negligent. This was based on the grounds that they had not issued him with muscle relaxants, they had not restrained him during the procedure, and he claimed he had not been warned about the risks involved. The judge, residing over the case of Mr. Bolam, sought the expert opinions of a number of other doctors. He found around an equal distribution of doctors would in fact perform either the modified technique, where they argued that the muscle relaxants should mitigate the risk of muscle spasm and therefore reduce the risk of injury. The remaining half of the experts agreed that a non-modified technique was appropriate given the potential side effects of the anesthetic agents that were available at that time. Judge McNear made a landmark ruling which established the basis for the Bolam test. He stated, a doctor who has acted in accordance with a practice accepted at the time as proper by a reasonable body of medical opinion skilled in that particular form of treatment in question was not guilty of negligence merely because there was a body of competent medical professional opinion which might adopt a different technique. Therefore, a defendant doctor would have upheld a reasonable standard of care, even if other expert witnesses state that the procedure should not be performed in this way, providing that another reasonable body of medical opinion agree with the defending doctor. Judge McNear wisely added the caveat, stating, whilst a man is not negligent merely because there is a body of opinion who would take a contrary view, this does not mean that a medical man can carry on with the same old technique. if it has been proven to be contrary to what is really substantially the whole of informed medical opinion. Essentially, it's not acceptable for any doctor to continue providing outdated clinical practice where evidence-based medicine has proven it to be substandard to a novel technique. Therefore, the doctor who provided the care to Mr. Bolam cannot be considered negligent on the grounds that he didn't use an appropriate technique. However, Mr. Bolam had further argued that he was not fully informed regarding the risks of the procedure. It was estimated that the likelihood of the complications that occurred in Mr. Bolam's case were around 1 in 10,000 cases. Therefore, the question was raised: should a doctor be criticised for not stressing the minimal risks involved in a treatment where the risk of refusal of treatment exists? In response to this, the Deputy Superintendent representing Friern Hospital declared, "Every patient must be considered as an individual. If they're unduly nervous, I do not say too much. If they ask me questions, I tell them the truth. The risk is small, but a serious thing when it happens, and it could be a great mistake if they refused to benefit from the treatment because of fear. In the case of a patient who is very depressed and suicidal, it is difficult to tell him of things you know would make him worse." During the case, it was determined that during the 1950s, treatments for depression were very limited. ECT was considered the mainstay treatment. Mr. Bolam's case was complicated, as without treatment his condition could have deteriorated. This would result in a worsened mental state. Given that there was an albeit small risk that he would have refused treatment, it was determined that under these circumstances, doctors could display a therapeutic privilege not to disclose the risks. This is a very paternalistic stance taken in the case of Mr. Bolam. Essentially, it is considered doctor knows best. Okay, so let's recap and summarize what we've learned. Clinical negligence is the failure by a healthcare professional to exercise a reasonable standard of care. In addition to this, you can only consider a doctor to be negligent where the doctor has a duty of care to the claimant, the doctor has breached his duty by falling below the reasonable standard of care, as determined by the Bolam's test, and foreseeable harm has occurred to the claimant. Regarding the Bolam test, it's aimed to determine the key question of whether a doctor has acted in accordance with a reasonable standard of care. The test defines that a doctor may not be considered negligent where his or her actions are supported by a body of other medical experts. Therefore, a doctor may be considered negligent where this support cannot be provided. Importantly, the Bolam test is essentially a peer review system. Your colleagues within the same field will therefore determine whether your actions as a doctor are reasonable. Thank you everyone for watching this lecture. In subsequent lectures, we'll be looking at the Buthilow test and the case of Montgomery versus Lanarkshire Healthcare Board. Both of these topics set about changes within the law regarding the standard of care for medical professionals. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe, click the bell and leave us a comment down below letting us know where you are studying because our team loves to know. Any questions and topic requests are of course welcome too. See you next time. If you found this lecture helpful, why not consider reviewing our medical ethics series of lectures? Some links are included here.